Good evening, and welcome to 100 Nights of Taps 2020 on this somber Memorial Day, May 25th, 2020. My name is Wendy Allen, and I am Vice President of the Lincoln Fellowship of Pennsylvania, and I'm also the founder of 100 Nights of Taps Gettysburg. Now in its fourth year, 100 Nights of Taps Gettysburg 2020 is sponsored by the Lincoln Fellowship of Pennsylvania in partnership with Taps for Veterans in the Gettysburg National Military Park. Tonight, I'm emceeing this ceremony on historic Baltimore Street here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Thank you for joining us to honor those who have given the last full measure of devotion for our nation. And, two, we send our deepest sympathies to those who are suffering loss during this COVID-19 pandemic. I would now like to introduce Raina, Skara, Eva, and Kaya, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance all the way from their home in Kenya.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would now like to introduce the President of the Lincoln Fellowship of Pennsylvania, the Reverend Stephen Herr.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you on behalf of the Lincoln Fellowship of Pennsylvania for tuning in to tonight's first 100 Nights of Taps, Gettysburg 2020. I'm standing here next to the return visit statue on Lincoln Square in Gettysburg, and this statue was placed here in 1991 by the Lincoln Fellowship of Pennsylvania. Our organization was founded in 1938 to remember Abraham Lincoln and his Gettysburg Address. And so I invite you to visit our website at www.lincolnfellowship.org to learn more about our Dedication Day program that occurs every year at the Gettysburg National Cemetery on November 19th. You can also learn more about this TAPS program as well on our webpage. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to you having the ability to return to Gettysburg in person soon to be able to see 100 Nights of Taps in person.
I am honored to introduce our keynote speaker for tonight, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant General Christopher F. Burne. General Burne was the 17th Judge Advocate General of the Air Force. Following the lead of his father, a highly decorated World War II 8th Air Force veteran, he was commissioned as a first lieutenant in the Air Force JAG Corps in 1983, retiring from active duty as a 3-star general after nearly 35 years of distinguished service. As the Air Force's top uniformed lawyer, General Burne served as the legal advisor to the Secretary of the Air Force Chief of Staff, and all officers and agencies of the Department of the Air Force. He was responsible for the professional direction of 4,500 military and civilian attorneys, paralegals, and administrative civilians, overseeing military justice, operational and international law, litigation, and civil law functions. During his illustrious career, he He twice deployed to the Persian Gulf region, and he was on duty in the Pentagon on September 11, 2001, during the terrorist attack. General Burne is now president of Charged with Excellence, a company he founded for leadership consulting and public speaking. He resides in Gettysburg with his wife Robin, who retired as a colonel from the Air Force Reserves, and their black lab Zorro. They have two sons, Christian and Connor, who are officers in the United States Army.
Good evening. I'm Lieutenant General retired Christopher Gwinn, speaking to you from Gettysburg, America's battlefield, and the ground that witnessed not just devastation and carnage, but bravery and courage, and hosted our 16th president as he spoke the words that defined America's core. We are here today to honor those who answered their nation's call to arms. But we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. With those words, President Lincoln acknowledged our feeble capacity to consecrate this ground, to fully honor those who fought here. Yet, he went on to commemorate the valiant struggle that took place here, and with heartfelt gratitude assert, it is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. And even with the passing of 157 years, 17 years ago, it remains not only fitting and proper that we do this, met on a great battlefield of that war, but it remains our solemn obligation that we honor these dead and all our military who made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. Historian Gary Wills once wrote that Gettysburg would become a symbol of national purpose, pride, and ideals. Those who have walked this good ground understand the profound truth of those words, and although many of us are presently forced to be a virtual witness to the battleground, we have in fact found a way to come together, thanks to Wendy's perseverance. And for the next 100 days, we will come together in a special way from across the country to pay our respects to these honored dead. 2 months ago, I attended a military funeral at Arlington. Still fresh are the chaplain's moving eulogy, the quiet cry of the widow, and the crisp 21-gun salute. The moment that embraced all of that, and all of us, though, was the sounding of taps. Tap somehow connects us to our fallen comrade in arms and to one another. As the bugler sounds that haunting, peaceful melody, as its notes gently reverberate from headstone to hillside, we are at that moment at peace, and our soul is stirred for the fallen. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this on Memorial Day 2020, and for all the Memorial Days forevermore. Day is done, gone the sun, from the lake, from the hills, from the sky. All is well, safely rest, God is nigh.
I would now like to introduce Christopher Gwinn. Chris is the Supervisory Park Ranger for Interpretation and Education at the Gettysburg National Military Park. He serves on the Board of Directors for the Lincoln Fellowship of Pennsylvania. Chris will now be unveiling our 2020 commemorative coin for program participants. Chris?
Thank you to Wendy. Thank you to the members of the Lincoln Fellowship of Pennsylvania and Taps for Veterans. Gettysburg National Military Park is proud to co-sponsor 100 Nights of Taps as a fitting way to pay tribute to the men buried in Gettysburg National Cemetery. Every year, the Lincoln Fellowship of Pennsylvania, Taps for Veterans, and Gettysburg National Military Park produce a commemorative coin to coincide with 100 Nights of Taps. This year, in tribute to one of the men buried in Gettysburg National Cemetery, that commemorative coin will feature an image of Sergeant Isaac Osborne. Isaac Osborne is a soldier in the 62nd Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry. He was from Jefferson County, Pennsylvania, and in 1861 he joined up with that regiment, went south, and fought in some of the most horrific battles of the American Civil War. He had a wife named Mary, and he had 2 children who he left back home in Jefferson County, Pennsylvania. On July 2nd, 1863, during the fighting in the wheat field, Isaac Osborne is mortally wounded. He'll be buried in the Soldiers' National Cemetery, the Gettysburg National Cemetery, in the Pennsylvania plot. Only 6 months after his death at the Battle of Gettysburg, Isaac Osborne's widow, Mary, would give birth to a 3rd child, and she'd name that boy Isaac after his dead father. By including the story of Isaac Osborne and his image on this commemorative coin, we pay tribute to all of the men buried in the Soldiers' National Cemetery at Gettysburg and carry on their legacy through 100 Nights of Taps. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It's now my honor to introduce Dana B. Shoaf. Dana is the editor of Civil War Times magazine. He first visited Gettysburg in 1973 and has never lost his fascination with the battle and its many stories. He is greatly honored to deliver the Gettysburg Address tonight. Dana.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Thank you, Dana. It is my honor to introduce Jari Villanueva to make a few remarks. Jari Villanueva is retired from the United States Air Force, where he served 23 years as trumpeter, drum major, and staff arranger with the United States Air Force Band in Washington, D.C. He is nationally and internationally recognized as a leading expert on military bugling and bugle calls. Today, Jari organized an amazing event, Taps Across America, the National Moment of Remembrance for Memorial Day 2020. He organized close to 1,000 buglers to sound taps at 3 p.m. today. Amazing, Jari. Jari?
Thank you, Wendy. As we pause on this Memorial Day to remember those who died in military service to our nation, let me thank each bugler, reader, and supporter of 100 Nights of Taps Gettysburg. The 24 notes sounded each evening exemplifies the gratitude of a nation to those who sacrificed so much in order for us to enjoy the freedoms we have. This is a challenging and solemn time in our nation's history, but the program to honor those will continue. And what better way to honor our nation's veterans than with the sounding of taps, our national song of remembrance.
Thank you, Jari. And now I'd like to introduce the Lincoln Fellowship of Pennsylvania board member and archivist, Kime.
The Lincoln Fellowship of Pennsylvania wishes to extend to our active duty military personnel, men and women, and to all veterans of our armed forces, a sincere thank you for your service.
Thank you, Ken. In closing, I miss not being at the beautiful Soldiers National Monument, but we will return there, and hopefully soon. It is where we stand to honor the ultimate sacrifice given for freedom by the soldiers interred there, and by the quiet, bright light of Lincoln's brief yet enduring address. Many thanks to the Lincoln Fellowship of Pennsylvania, Taps for Veterans, and the Gettysburg National Military Park for supporting this poignant ceremony and supporting the chance for all of us to come together to honor the brave in the quiet light. But for now, please join us here every evening at 7 p.m. for 100 Nights of Taps, Gettysburg 2020. And now, Jari Villanueva.